The main process that is taking place across Europe, and it's reflected in the Council conclusions, is a process of very rapid and dangerous militarisation under the leadership of US imperialism. It's a process that has different kind of aspects, national specificities, but in all countries it's heading in the same direction. From Germany, which is massively increasing its military spending, Finland and Sweden applying to join NATO and increasing the military spending, and what we're seeing in this country in terms of the attempts to de facto and then later de jure get rid of what is left of neutrality. That's very, very clear. What has happened in this country so far since Putin's horrendous invasion of Ukraine has been quite rapid moves to go much further than any previous government has gone in terms of walking well over the line of neutrality. We've had the sending of military aid to another country. The first time the EU has ever sent military aid to a third country, and Ireland participated. Ireland participated and then said, oh no, don't worry, we paid for the non-lethal bits. It didn't change the overall package of military aid, but it's a pure fig leaf for the government to hide behind. Ireland has now repeatedly participated in meetings of what is described by the US Secretary of Defence as a NATO alliance, the Ukraine Contact Defence Group, an organisation which meets at NATO headquarters, either NATO headquarters in Brussels or NATO Allied Air Command at the Ramstein Air Base in Germany. And now Ireland is sending troops to participate in a military assistance mission organised by the European Union with the express purpose of enhancing the military capability of the Ukrainian armed forces. Not enough, it isn't enough just for the government to be able to walk all over any concept of neutrality in practice. They also want to get rid of it, even in principle, in something that the government is kind of politically bound by. That is why we have what is being called consultative forums being established. Very, very revealing that Micheál Martin, just over a month ago, was saying, well, we could have a citizens' assembly, but now instead what we have is national consultative forums made up of experts, supposedly inspired by the principles of the citizens' assembly, but most importantly avoiding the key principle of the citizens' assembly, i.e. a random selection of citizens. Instead, we're going to have a stage-managed, top-down process where we'll hear from experts, some of whom will be funded by the armaments industry, to say why we all have to be mature and so on, and move on from neutrality. And that is linked to the essential essence of Joe Biden's speech to the Dáil last week, which was to effectively talk about a new Cold War, to say that the key struggle in the world today is between democracy and autocracy, and to basically say, of course, we know Ireland is on the side of democracy versus autocracy. Of course, Joe Biden is not actually talking about democracy and autocracy. They're just words to mean the West and the East, because Joe Biden didn't mention, of course, his ongoing support for the apartheid state of Israel, the state attacks on Palestinians in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the state-endorsed attacks by far-right settlers, endorsed by a far-right government on Palestinians, no mention of US military support for Saudi Arabia and its killing for over 20,000 Yemeni civilians, no mention of the fact that actually a majority of dictatorships in the world today receive military aid from US imperialism. But clearly that's what's going on, lining up so-called West versus the East, and the government wants us to be part of the US-led NATO camp. We think we should reject both imperialisms, the multiple imperialisms that exist in the world today, reject all oppression and consistently stand out against it. And in relation to Ukraine, we absolutely should continue to condemn Putin's horrendous invasion of Ukraine, the denial of Ukrainian people's right to self-determination. We also should be calling for peace. An incredible 300,000 people, according to some reports, have now died in Ukraine. The lines of war have barely moved in months. More and more weapons are being thrown into the battlefield, and it is ordinary people who are dying as a consequence. We should be raising our voice for peace. Finally, I want to raise the question of Nord Stream. It's a question that somehow nobody wants to find an answer to. But who is responsible for the destruction of Nord Stream, which saw gas prices rise dramatically, which saw the biggest single discharge of methane the world has ever seen? And yet it seems nobody is interested in finding out who is responsible. In fact, the US and allies the other day at the Security Council abstained on a resolution in order to block a resolution to have an independent international investigation to find out who was responsible for Nord Stream. Did the government ask that of Joe Biden? I severely doubt it.